What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and we're back for another episode of the fighting game tutorial series. In this episode we're going to be finishing up the final touches of our camera, our code camera. So to this point we've transferred pretty much everything. There's two things that I missed, and then there's two events we haven't gone over yet. But all of our base logic for our camera is now implemented. So at this point we can come in and everything works as normal, right? Nothing should be broken because we haven't changed our camera over to use that code camera. And hopefully after we change it over, nothing is broken either. If you want to get caught up in the series and see how we've done everything from our special moves, our hitboxes, and much more, please check out the series. There's an icon in the top right corner right here. That will show you everything you need to know to get started and to catch up to this point. We're very far along, but there's still plenty to do, so now's a great time to hop into it. If you're only interested in the C++ fighting game tutorial camera, you can go ahead and check out this right here. This is the first episode of the fighting game camera that we implemented in this series, and we are building off of that logic in today's episode, so it is useful if you're familiar with it already. With those out of the way, we can go ahead and get started. So this is a code and blueprint tutorial series, but we're going to be transferring a few more things from blueprint to code today, and then we're going to be making sure that all of our things are spawned correctly from the code. So this one is going to be a pretty mixed episode. First things first, let's go back to our base camera BP. So for me, that's blueprints, functional BPs, cameras, base camera BP. This is the camera we've been using in the series to date. Now everything you see in this logic that I'm highlighting here, I know you can't read it, but all of this behavior right here has been accounted for in the code, except for a few things that I missed, mainly calling a few functions that we made in previous episodes. So first of all, set inner boundaries, and next of all, for this one, what we want to do is make sure we are calling this where we should, because we created the function in code, but we never actually called it properly. So if we right click set inner boundaries, we can find our references. You can see it's in three places. First of all, we have two in the event graph, and then second, we have the function itself. Well, the function itself is already taken care of, so we're interested in these two function calls in the event graph. First, it is called in the area where we're setting the edges, which is in our begin play or use camera function. So we want to make sure we do this in the code as well. If we go to our base camera.cpp class and we scroll down to use camera, I actually left a comment in here, but we never went back and called this function after creating it. So at the very end, I left this comment, determine and set inner boundaries. This is where we want to call our calculate inner boundaries function that we have. Calculate inner boundaries. Now, this does take a boolean on if the player 1 is on the left or not. Right now, when we call use camera, player 1 is always spawning on the left. We don't have a way to switch sides, so we don't have to grab this from anywhere. We can just assume that this is true, although we will likely need to update that if we implement side swapping. Or if we ever just want to spawn player 1 on the right, that would be enough reason to change this. But for now, we're just going to keep it as true. The other place it is called within the base camera BP is in the tick function. So here is tick. We are updating the inner boundaries based on where the characters are, and so we call determine left player at one point in tick, and after that we want to pass in the result of that into set inner boundaries. So if we go to our tick function, you see in here we're not calling the determine character on left, or in code as it's called is team1 character on left, so we need to do this. So let's take a step back and figure out where that function is being called. This is being called after set actor location, specifically as the true result of a branch of if the camera should move. Basically, if the camera is not locked for any reason and it should actually move location, this will return true, which will then set us on this path to also update the boundaries, because the boundaries move when the camera moves. So going back to the code now, if camera should move returns true. We go into this logic here, and we're calling set actor location right here. This is the set actor location you're seeing here. So we need to call determine left player and set inner boundaries. Again, in code they have slightly different names. It is team1 character on left. This is going to return a boolean if it is true. So now we have to call calculate inner boundaries and pass in the result of this function. I'm going to add some comments here. Move the camera. Move the inner boundaries. And I'm going to add a comment to the else here. Move the camera. Excellent. So now we have covered all of our places we need to use determine left player and set inner boundaries. We can confirm this by right-clicking on determine left player and finding references. You'll see it's only called the one place. The next thing we want to do is call set outer boundaries in all the places we need to do that. So I want to right-click on this function and find references. You'll see it's only the function itself and in the event graph, specifically in begin play or use camera, just like the previous one was. And it's being called right after set inner boundaries. So we can literally go to use camera, determine and set outer boundaries, calculate outer boundaries. I'm also going to update this. Outer boundary locations, properties, and same with this one, boundary properties. There we go. And now our camera should be pretty much one-to-one with this. We haven't done these two events. These haven't been transferred to code, the freeze camera and resume camera. We will be converting these to code at some point, but we're not going to do it right now. I also had duplicate variables in here, left max and right max. They were in here 2 times, so I'm just going to make sure I remove one of them. No reason to have 2 sets of them. This means I also need to remove them from the constructor. They're already up here, so adding them again is just silly. We are going to go ahead and actually add some basic behavior for freeze camera and resume camera in this episode. Long story short, I had to do things out of order because of the way the files are stored on my computer. I'm accessing 2 different versions of this fighter to make this tutorial. So don't worry too much about if you see missing variables, missing functions in here. Just keep going along with everything you've seen in the series. In this version of the fighter, I've already removed the functions from the base camera BP, and I'm letting the code camera do the work, but that's actually going to be handled in the next episode. You'll see that whole process. So don't focus on any of that. Let's just take a look at our custom events, freeze camera and resume camera here, and we'll go ahead and convert them to code to the best of our ability. We don't actually have the super camera in code yet, so we technically can't do this, but we can make functions out of these 2 events, and we can do all the set view target with blend logic. So first things first, we have the freeze camera event here. This can be turned into a function in our code class. So if we go to basecamera.h, scroll down here right above the tick, stop camera logic from firing, and swap to the super camera. So this is for super text. We may want to have another cinematic camera as well. And so it might not just be for the super camera. So let's say, or other cinematic camera. And we'll say void freeze camera, because that's what we were calling it in the blueprint. Then let's have another function here, resume camera logic, and swap back to this camera. Void resume camera. Now we can go to basecamera.cpp. We'll scroll down here and make these functions. I'm going to put them right above the tick function. Void a base camera, freeze camera, void a base camera, resume camera. And now we just have to transfer everything over. Everything in this freeze camera function has to do with the super camera. So we don't need to do anything in it today. Let's leave it alone. Let's just have the function there. With resume camera, however, we can actually handle all this logic today. So first thing we're going to do is set view target with blend. This is what we did, the use camera function that we have in code and what we were previously doing in the use camera and blueprint function or event right here. So we're determining the first player controller, or the player controller that we want to use to look at this camera, and then we're setting their view target with blend to be this object, which is the base camera. Basically, what this is doing is allowing us to look through that camera, see what the camera is seeing. We're going to do this same logic today. I'm going to copy this functionality from use camera and put it in here. Paste. But I'll still go through it. So first thing here is we're making a new variable, a player controller pointer type. We're calling it default player controller. We're setting it equal to uGameplay statics, : get player controller. So basically this will find all of our player controllers, and we want to find one with this context, which is the world or the level we're in, at this index, and this is index 0. So just return the first player controller to us if we can find one. Then I put the whole thing inside of an if statement. So if we don't find one, that means there was no controller to find. We're not going to try and set anything on an invalid controller. So if we don't go into this if statement, we don't do anything. If we do go into the if statement, we're going to use the default player controller and call setViewTarget with blend, passing in this again. That is the object that is running this function. So whatever's running resume camera, which is our base camera. So this is the actor or the object that we want to use to see through. And for you gameplay statics here, if you're just joining in late and you haven't been following the series, you do need to include kismet/gameplaystatics.h up at the top. Then after that, we have a delay, which we can use a timer for if we want this timer in code. Only reason for this delay is so that we don't get rid of the super camera while we're in the middle of using it. I gave this blend time from the super camera back to our regular camera, 0.3, which means it takes 0.3 seconds to switch between these cameras. If we were to destroy the super camera right away, it would automatically eliminate any blend time that we were using and just use the new camera. I don't really want that. I actually want the blend to complete. So we used a delay here. But again, we can use a timer instead. I don't have the ability to destroy this actor because we don't have this temp camera actor in the code yet. That's our super camera, which is why we couldn't fill out anything in freeze camera. So I'm going to leave this part alone for now, but just know we will be getting rid of this delay and instead using a timer. Now, once we're done with all this, I do highly recommend making a copy of your project, or at least of your camera files, because in the next episode, we are going to be using our C++ camera instead of our blueprint camera, or rather, we are using the blueprint camera, but it's going to be running all of our C++ logic. So if anything's wrong when we're getting rid of it, it could cause some issues on your end. But if you have a backup, we can always revert back to that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a backup here for myself. Even though I already have this tested in a different version of the fighter and I know it works, it's good to have a backup. If you have source control, definitely keep that. That will be your best friend for this. But anyway, works as long as you have another copy. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this episode and it helped you make your camera in code, then please subscribe. It helps out the channel a lot and lets me know that you're interested in this type of content. If you'd like to support the channel further, you can check out the Patreon, YouTube membership, and Discord subscriptions to see the benefits you get from doing so. And a huge thank you to everyone who already has. If you ran into any problems while following this tutorial or any of my tutorials, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description, and I would be happy to help you. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.